When I told my family I was getting divorced, my dad grinned and said, "Well, this just shows we were right about you all along, you've always been a quitter." My mom and sisters agreed with him. So I walked out of that dinner and cut them all off for good. Now 2 years later I'm remarried and doing great, and they're confused why they weren't invited to the wedding and keep saying I'm holding a grudge over nothing. The words barely left my lips, we separated. And then, my own father laughed. Not a kind laugh, not even a shocked one, a laugh that felt like a punch to the gut, changing everything I thought I knew about family. The clinking of silverware suddenly sounded deafening in the heavy silence that followed. The air in that polished dining room, usually filled with forced pleasantries, now crackled with an unspoken judgment. I was Ethan, 34 at the time, still reeling from signing divorce papers just a week prior. I felt hollow, exhausted, but I was doing my best to project an image of control, as if my life hadn't just been reduced to ashes. My family, they'd suspected something was off. My wedding ring was gone. I'd dodged questions about Chloe for months, but this dinner, this was supposed to be the moment. I'd foolishly hoped they'd see how thin I'd gotten, how my hands shook reaching for water, maybe even ask if I was okay. But this was my family. My dad, Michael, believed emotion was a weakness, something to beat out of yourself by age 10. He was old school, all the worst ways. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, even with a trust fund. Men don't cry unless their wife leaves, and then, you must have deserved it. My mom, Susan, was the professional enabler, a master of passive-aggressive silence. And my sisters, Jessica and Sarah, always the golden girls. Straight-A students, married doctors, perfect suburban houses, matching labradoodles. They spoke in tandem like twins in a horror movie, even though they were 3 years apart. And me? I was the youngest, the creative one, the dreamer. Their polite way of saying I never met expectations. Film over finance, my own production company. And then, Chloe, a sculptor with a tattoo, a woman they never quite accepted. Mom once pulled me aside at Christmas, asking if Chloe was with me just for stability. I laughed it off then, but the comment stuck, a dull ache. This dinner, it was casual. Just family, catching up. I'd planned to break the news later, perhaps with coffee, when everyone had relaxed. But the moment I sat down, I knew. Jessica looked smug. Sarah looked nosy. Dad had that familiar gleam in his eye, gearing up for a lecture. Halfway through his steak, he didn't even look up. "Where's Chloe?" Still finding herself at that artist commune? He said it like a joke, but his tone carried a bite. I paused, glancing at Mom, hoping she'd intervene. She just dabbed her mouth with a napkin, took a sip of wine. I cleared my throat. "We separated," I said, quietly. "A few months ago. The divorce finalized last week." For a second, just a second, there was silence. I naively thought it might be sympathy, a breath held in solidarity. Then Dad leaned back, shook his head, and laughed. Not kind, not shocked. Just that dismissive, contemptuous laugh. "Well," he said, folding his arms behind his head. "This just proves we were right about you all along. You've always been a quitter." I blinked, speechless. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step. I looked at my sisters, half expecting one of them to jump in, say something neutral. Instead, Sarah snorted. "I mean, you kind of give up on things when they get hard. You left that job in Dallas after 2 months, remember?" Jessica added, nodding. "And that documentary you never finished? Didn't you lose money on that?" Mom didn't say a word. Just a small, tight smile and a shrug, like, "What can you do?" I was stunned. For the next 15 minutes, I just sat there, picking at my food, replaying their words. They really thought that. They thought I was a joke, a screw-up, someone who invited their own misery. The thing is, Chloe and I didn't break up because I gave up. We fought, hard. Therapy, space, retreats, books. But love isn't always enough. People grow. She wanted a simpler life, no city, no late-night shoots. I couldn't give her that without killing the part of me that makes me feel alive. It wasn't failure, it was survival. But try explaining that to a table full of people who'd already decided who you are. By the end of dinner, my appetite was gone. I pushed my chair back without a word. Just stood up and walked out. They kept talking. No one followed. No one called. Not that night. Not the next day. It was like my pain was an inconvenience they were grateful to be rid of. That was the night I cut them all off. No big announcement, no dramatic confrontation. I just stopped answering texts, returning calls, removed myself from the family group chat. Birthdays came, holidays passed. I didn't show up, didn't explain. If they wanted to treat me like I didn't matter, I'd disappear. I didn't expect silence to be so loud. After that dinner, I thought someone, anyone, might reach out. Not to apologize, but to at least pretend they cared. Days turned into weeks. Not a single message. The family group chat buzzed with Jessica's daughter's recital, Sarah gushing about yoga, Dad ranting about gas prices. But I stayed quiet. No one noticed I was gone. I didn't block them. I wanted to see how little I mattered when I stopped putting in effort. I'd always been the one chasing connection, the first to call, sending gifts early, remembering anniversaries, driving 3 hours for Christmas even during a fight. I kept trying to prove I belonged in a family that never really opened the door. After that dinner, I stopped. The first holiday was Easter. Mom always hosted, guilt-tripping me with, "It's not really about religion, Ethan, it's about family." I ghosted the invite. Later, seeing photos, everyone lined up in pastels, holding wine glasses, my absence didn't even earn a mention. What did surprise me was Dad's voicemail 3 days later. Not an apology, just a gruff. Clipped message, "You missed Easter again. Don't know what point you're trying to make, but it's childish. Family shows up. Grow up." Click. I listened to it on my morning walk, standing by a pond, and laughed. Laughed out loud because he had the nerve to call me childish. That laugh turned darker, though. Something tight in my chest, something like rage. I saved the voicemail. Maybe for moments like this, when I doubt myself, a reminder of why I walked away. Life moved on. Mine, at least. I threw myself into work, shooting personal projects, documentaries, shorts, experimental pieces. Things that made me feel like myself again. And somewhere in all that, I met Olivia. She was nothing like Chloe. Where Chloe was soft-spoken, Olivia was loud and funny, telling stories with her whole body. She'd been through her own mess, a nasty engagement ending with her ex draining their account and ghosting her before the wedding. We bonded slowly, carefully. Not looking to fix each other, just tired of pretending to be fine alone. I didn't tell my family about her. Not out of shame, but protection. I didn't want their opinions infecting something good. I'd made that mistake once. But word got out. Jessica ran into us at a bookstore. I was holding Olivia's hand, laughing about a dog in a sweater. Jessica stood frozen with her husband, staring like she'd seen a ghost. No hello, no wave. Just that stare. A week later, Mom's text, "Heard you're seeing someone new. Hope you're not making another impulsive decision. We only want what's best for you." I stared at it for 10 minutes before deleting it. What could I say? That Olivia made me laugh like I hadn't in years? That she read my scripts and gave real feedback? That she showed up at 2 a.m. with soup when I had the flu? They didn't want what was best for me. They wanted control, approval, obedience. That summer, I posted a photo of Olivia and me on a hiking trail. Just a selfie, her smiling, me red-faced. Caption: She made me climb a mountain. I survived. Within an hour, Sarah commented, already replacing Chloe. That was fast. Then Jessica chimed in, wow, didn't realize you were that kind of guy. And Mom liked both comments. I didn't respond. I archived the post. And I blocked them all. Olivia noticed, of course. She asked if everything was okay. I told her the truth, not the whole history, but enough. Enough for her to understand my family didn't know how to love without conditions. That I wasn't ready to let them ruin something that made me happy. She didn't push, just took my hand and said, "You're not alone this time." For the first time in years, I believed it. The real breaking point came that fall. Olivia and I had moved in together. Her lease was up, my place was closer to our jobs. We liked falling asleep on the couch mid-movie. One night, rearranging furniture, the doorbell rang. It was Jessica. She looked different, like she'd been crying or holding it in. Her tone was all fake warmth. Hi. Wow. It's been forever. She acted like nothing had happened, like we hadn't spent a year in silence. I stood in the doorway, not inviting her in. Olivia stayed in the background, respectful but present. Jessica's eyes flicked to her, then back to me, lips tightening. I just wanted to talk, she said. You've been really distant. Everyone's been worried. That made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Worried? I repeated. Really? Is that what Dad was when he left me a voicemail calling me childish? She waved a hand like swatting a gnat. You know how he is. He didn't mean it like that. Oh no? I said. What about you or Sarah or Mom? Jessica had the audacity to look hurt. We were just trying to help. You were making bad choices, Ethan. We thought if we didn't say something, you'd end up alone again. And I guess that's what you wanted, right? I said, my voice rising. So you could sit around and say, see, told you so. She blinked fast. We're family. We love you. No, you don't, I said, stepping back. You love control. You love being right. You love each other. But me? You've never treated me like I belonged. Then I shut the door. She stood there for a full minute before I heard her footsteps retreat. I thought that would be the end. But 2 weeks later, a letter arrived. A formal invitation to a family reconciliation dinner. Handwritten, stiff, like a ceasefire proposal. At the bottom, in Mom's looping cursive, we miss you. Let's move on from the past. I should have ignored it. But a small, stupid, stubborn part of me thought, maybe. Maybe they realized. Olivia warned me, only go if you're sure it won't break you again. I told her I was fine. I wasn't. Because that night, everything finally snapped. They crossed a line I could never forgive. I knew I shouldn't have gone. I told myself it would be different. That a handwritten invitation meant something. Maybe the silence had bred guilt. Maybe they missed me, not just the version of me who nodded, smiled, and paid the bill. But I should have listened to Olivia. Trusted that gut feeling whispering, they haven't changed. They never will. The family reconciliation dinner was at my parents' house. Same big, cold house. Polished floors, furniture no one sat on. It was weird, walking up those steps again. The same porch light, the same doorbell chime. For a moment, I was 17, coming home after curfew, bracing for Dad's silent disapproval and Mom's disappointed sigh. Susan answered the door with that tight, rehearsed smile she wore for company. A stiff, brief hug, then she stepped aside. The house felt like a museum. Nothing had changed. Not the fake flowers, the decorative fruit, or the family photo from 10 years ago. Chloe was still in it, still smiling. That hit me harder than expected. Sarah and Jessica were already there. Sarah pouring wine, Jessica setting the table, humming like it was just another Sunday dinner. Dad sat in his chair, the one no one else touched, watching sports on mute. No one looked surprised to see me. No one looked relieved. We sat down. For a while, small talk. Jessica asked about work. Sarah mentioned a new vacation home. Mom passed the roast chicken and asked if I was still with that girl, Olivia. That girl? I corrected her. Olivia, my partner? Yes, she said. You've been moving pretty fast, haven't you? I didn't reply, just kept chewing. Then, Dad leaned back, a sigh like he'd been waiting for this moment all night. So, he said, let's talk about what happened. You cut off your family. Over a few words. Over some jokes at dinner. Jokes? I looked up. Is that what you call it? Jessica chimed in. Ethan, we didn't mean to hurt you. You were going through a tough time. We were just being honest. Sarah nodded. And you do have a pattern, you know. You get emotional. You shut people out. You don't follow through. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so predictable. They hadn't brought me here to reconcile. They brought me here to gaslight me, to rewrite the narrative, to paint themselves as reasonable and me as the overreactive black sheep. I came here thinking maybe something had changed, I said. But you just wanted a chance to tell me I was wrong. Again. Mom set down her fork. We're just saying you could have handled things better. That was it. That was the moment. I stood up, took my napkin, dropped it on the plate. I don't need this, I said. Not anymore. And then, for the first time in my life, I walked out without looking back. That night, I hit what I thought was rock bottom. Not because I missed them or regretted anything I said. But because I realized I never really had a family. Not in the way people talk about when they say, my family has my back. I had people who shared my blood and kept a scoreboard. People who demanded loyalty without offering love. Who called my boundaries drama and my independence failure. That night, I sat in my car for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt hollow, like everything I believed about love and connection had been carved out of me. Olivia stayed up waiting for me. When I walked through the door, she didn't ask what happened. She just pulled me into a hug and said, "You're home now." And that's when I realized rock bottom wasn't the dinner. It was before that. It was every time I let their words make me question my worth. Every time I bit my tongue instead of defending myself. Every time I lowered my voice so I wouldn't upset the room. That night was the turning point. The beginning of the rise. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But it started with little things. I went to therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind you lie through. I found Dr. Hayes, a former artist turned psychologist. He got it. He understood being the weird one in a family obsessed with image. He helped me unpack years of shame I didn't know I was carrying. Helped me stop flinching every time I made a mistake, expecting someone to say, "Told you so." Olivia and I traveled more, not for pictures, but to live. We took a road trip up the coast, slept in cheap motels with sand in the sheets. We hiked, we laughed, we talked about buried dreams. She wanted to open a ceramic studio. I wanted to make a film just for me. So, I did. That winter, I shot a short film. No budget, just friends, favors, borrowed lights. It was raw, messy, personal. A story about a man rewriting the narrative his family wrote for him. I didn't tell anyone what it was really about, but it was mine. When it premiered at a tiny indie festival that spring and got a standing ovation, something cracked open inside me. Not pride, not vindication. Peace. I wasn't who they said I was. I never had been. Olivia was there, holding my hand. After the screening, a stranger, a guy in his 20s, nervous, awkward, said, "That felt like you wrote it about my life." And I realized something. Maybe that pain had a purpose. Maybe walking away had made room for something real. Not just love, but meaning, freedom. I started turning down work that didn't excite me. Said no to draining projects. Started teaching workshops instead, sharing what I'd learned, giving other dreamers the space I never had. Meanwhile, the silence from my family turned into noise. Sarah sent emails, then a voicemail, calling me immature for ignoring them, especially with Dad getting older. Jessica reached out through an old mutual friend, asking if Olivia and I would start fresh. Then came the kicker. Mom sent a card. No note, just a family photo. Them standing in front of the house, Dad, Sarah, Jessica, their husbands, the grandkids. In the center, a gap, like someone had been cropped out. On the back, in her careful script, "There's always room if you decide to come back." Olivia saw it before I did. She handed it to me, eyes unreadable. I stared at it for a long time. Then I tore it in half. I wasn't going back. I wasn't shrinking myself to fit their table anymore. And yet, they weren't done. Just as Olivia and I started talking about marriage, just as life was finally feeling mine, they pulled one last trick. Something so manipulative, so public, it could have unraveled everything I'd built if I hadn't been stronger. I didn't plan revenge. Not at first. Cutting contact was survival. A line in the sand. I was done trying to belong somewhere I never fit. Done bleeding myself dry for people who claimed to love me, just so they could stay comfortable in their version of the truth. For a while, I genuinely tried to move on, to let it go. But people like my family don't just want you to fall in line, they need it. It keeps their fragile ecosystem intact. Without the scapegoat, the black sheep, the emotional one, they're forced to look at themselves. That's something they'd spent their lives avoiding. It started with whispers. Olivia heard from a mutual acquaintance, an old college friend of Sarah's, that my name had come up at brunch. Apparently, Jessica had been saying I was spiraling, that Olivia was a rebound, that I was clearly not over Chloe. Olivia laughed it off. But when it happened again, this time from someone in the film festival circuit, it wasn't funny. A festival coordinator pulled me aside. "Hey man, everything okay with your family?" Jessica said something about a breakdown. I stared at him. What kind of breakdown? He shrugged, uncomfortable. I don't know. Just, she said you've been unstable since the divorce. That your last film was like a cry for help. I thanked him, excused myself, went outside to breathe. Unstable. A cry for help. It wasn't enough for them to exclude me. Now they wanted to poison everything I'd built, subtly, quietly. Just enough to raise questions, cast doubt, undermine me in spaces where I finally felt I was thriving. That's when the fire started to build. Not the kind that burns you up, but the kind that sharpens you, focuses you. The kind that makes you dangerous. Olivia and I were planning our wedding quietly by then. Just the two of us. No big announcements. We weren't hiding it, we were protecting it. Every time we talked about venues, playlists, honeymoon spots, I felt like I was building something sacred, something no one could touch. But then, out of nowhere, Mom called. She never called. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year. I didn't answer, of course, but she left a voicemail. Her voice was syrupy, like she was reading from a script. Hi, sweetheart. We heard some exciting news through the grapevine. A wedding! Oh, Ethan, I hope this means we're finally turning a corner. We'd love to be part of it. Please don't let old wounds ruin something so important. Family is family. Olivia played it. I was too angry to hear it directly. She just looked at me, shook her head, and said, "They think they can talk their way into this." I didn't respond right away. I needed to think. The more I thought, the clearer it became. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted a photo op. They wanted to show up in their Sunday best, smile for the camera, pretend everything was fine. Like they'd always supported me. Like they weren't the reason I almost walked away from my entire life 2 years ago. That's when the idea formed. Not revenge in the traditional sense. No firebombs, no dramatic scenes. Just the truth, delivered at the right time, in the right way, where they couldn't hide from it. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to expose them. So, I started planning. First step, gather everything. Old messages, voicemails, emails. Dad's voicemail calling me childish. Sarah's Instagram comment about replacing Chloe. Jessica's gossip. The Christmas card with the cropped photo. Mom's guilt-laced emails. I archived it all, organized it, created a digital folder labeled The Rewrite. Then I looped in Olivia. She was hesitant. Didn't want me pulled back into their drama. But once she saw how deep the manipulation went, how calculated it all was, she understood. She even helped me gather more context. She spoke to mutuals, compared dates, pulled screenshots. It became our quiet little mission. Next step, prepare the guest list. Small ceremony, no more than 40 people. Close friends, chosen family, colleagues who'd become more like siblings. I sent individual invitations by hand, wrote personal notes. But when it came to them, I paused. Olivia asked gently, "Do you want them there?" I shook my head. No. But I want them to know why they're not. So, I started writing letters. Not invitations. Statements. Each one addressed personally, to Mom, Dad, Jessica, Sarah. I didn't rant. I didn't insult. I just told the truth. I wrote about that dinner, how they dismissed my pain, mocked my divorce, called me a quitter. I wrote about the silence afterward, how no one checked in, not once. About their online comments, their gossip, their fake reconciliation attempt that ended in blame shifting and gaslighting. I wrote about the card, the photo, the hole where I used to be. And then I told them what the wedding would be, a celebration of love built on respect, healing, choice. And that's why they weren't invited. I didn't mail them yet. I waited. Because I had one more move. I called an old friend, Maya. I'd worked with her years ago on a documentary about family estrangement. She now ran a nonprofit supporting adult children of toxic families. She'd always told me, "If you ever want to tell your story, Ethan, I'll make space for it." I said yes. We filmed a short piece, 10 minutes, in a quiet studio. Raw, intimate. I told my story, not naming names, not airing every detail, but speaking honestly about the shame of being the scapegoat, the exhaustion of being the peacemaker, the grief of letting go of people who never really saw you. It went live on the nonprofit's YouTube channel 3 weeks before the wedding. It didn't go viral. That wasn't the point. But it reached the right people. I know because 2 days after it went up, I got an email from Jessica. Just one line. Unbelievable. You aired our dirty laundry to strangers. No apology, no reflection. Just offense. That's when I knew I'd struck a nerve. Perfect. So, I mailed the letters. Each in a black envelope, no return address. Inside, a printed copy of the piece I'd written. No handwritten note, no signature. Just the truth. The day before the wedding, I received one last message. It was from Mom. A voicemail. You've humiliated this family, Ethan. Whatever you think we did, whatever version of events you've created in your head, you're wrong. I hope you enjoy your little performance tomorrow. Just know when it falls apart, we won't be here to pick up the pieces. Olivia and I listened to it together. She looked at me and said, "They're panicking." And I realized she was right. The power wasn't in the event, it was in the choice. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was deciding. And the next day, when we walked down that aisle, when I saw Olivia smiling at me like I was the safest place in the world, I knew I hadn't just escaped something toxic. I'd built something better. But I wasn't done yet. Because after the wedding came the fallout. And what they did next, that was their biggest mistake. They tried to weaponize the one thing they thought I still wanted, my name, my legacy, my story. I had to remind them, I'm not the scared kid at the dinner table anymore. I'm the man who walked away and built a life worth envying. Now, it was time to make sure they never rewrote that truth again. I didn't expect them to show up. Not physically. Not after the letters, not after the video. I thought maybe they'd finally get the message and slink off to wherever people like them go when they're no longer the center of someone's orbit. But narcissism doesn't fade quietly. 3 days after the wedding, while Olivia and I were still on our honeymoon, a cabin tucked into the mountains, no signal, no noise, I turned on my phone. A flood of texts, missed calls, notifications. Apparently, Jessica had posted something. A photo collage. At first glance, it looked like a tribute. Pictures of us as kids, family vacations, awkward prom photos, even my graduation. Her caption read, "No matter how far you run, we'll always be family. Congratulations to my baby brother Ethan on tying the knot. Even if we weren't invited, we're still proud of you. Hashtag family first, hashtag unconditional love." Hundreds of comments. Most were generic well wishes from her friends. Some, though, were confused. A few asked why she hadn't been at the wedding. One even said, "Didn't Ethan go no contact with you guys?" But the post wasn't the worst part. She tagged Olivia. Olivia, who had never interacted with Jessica online. Olivia, who had already blocked my family on everything. Now she was being dragged into their web, with strangers commenting on her page, some praising her, others clearly from my family's circle, subtly suggesting she'd isolated me from my roots. Olivia showed me one comment, "It's a red flag when someone cuts off their entire family just because their new partner doesn't fit in." We sat on the cabin couch, surrounded by pine trees and stillness, staring at the screen. "This isn't just manipulation," she said quietly. "It's image control." She was right. They weren't trying to reconnect. They were trying to rewrite history. They wanted to frame it like they'd always supported me, that I was the unstable one, the bitter one, the emotionally fragile little brother who pushed everyone away. And they were the saints, endlessly patient, endlessly forgiving, just waiting for me to come back home. But this time, I was ready. I'd spent years letting them write the story, letting them shape the narrative, letting them control what people thought of me, my choices, my life. No more. I texted Maya. She answered immediately. "I was expecting this," she said. "You still have your account login?" I nodded. We got to work. The nonprofits page had grown. Their platform reached thousands now, people who had lived through similar stories, who recognized the patterns, the gaslighting, the emotional blackmail. Maya had always been clear, if I ever wanted to share more, they'd support it. So, I wrote a follow-up. This time, I named them. Not with legal names, not with photos, but with roles. The father who called me a quitter. The sister who called my healing a phase. The mother who cropped me out of the family. I told the full story, calmly, clearly, with timestamps and screenshots and direct quotes from their letters, comments, voicemails. I blurred out identifying info, anonymized faces, but I made sure every sentence was rooted in truth. At the end of the video, a single line in white text on a black screen, they told me I was rewriting history. I'm just reading it out loud. The video dropped on a Wednesday morning. By Friday, it had 250,000 views. By Sunday, 500,000. But more than the views were the comments. Hundreds, thousands of people sharing their stories. Estranged siblings, adult children of narcissists, survivors of toxic households. They didn't just believe me, they recognized me. The next week, a journalist who ran a podcast about family estrangement reached out. She wanted to feature the story. I said yes. Then a mid-sized digital publication asked for an op-ed. I wrote it myself. I titled it, "The Cost of Being the Family Scapegoat, and Why I'm Not Paying It Anymore." My inbox filled with invitations to speak on panels, contribute to articles, lead workshops for creatives dealing with family rejection. I wasn't just telling my story anymore. I was owning it. And the best part? There was nothing they could do. They couldn't sue, they weren't named. They couldn't call it a lie, I had the receipts. They couldn't shame me, they'd already tried. Eventually, they tried silence. Jessica deleted the photo collage. Sarah made her account private. My mother sent one last message. No words, just a broken heart emoji. But the damage was done. Their narrative had collapsed. Mine had taken root. As for me, Olivia and I bought a home just outside the city. A quiet, sunlit place with a backyard big enough for the dog we swore we wouldn't get, but did anyway, a mutt named Basil with one ear that never quite flops the same way twice. I still make films, more now than ever. But I also speak, teach, mentor. My inbox is full of people thanking me for surviving, for walking away, for telling the truth. The revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't petty. It wasn't cruel. It was this. I lived well. I told the truth. And I never looked back. They say you can't choose your family, but you can choose your ending. I chose mine. I chose peace. What would you have chosen?